What you don't know about me is Bono and I are like this. He's a good friend. It started, ironically, Friday, Labor Day weekend, 1996. I'm a manager at Kramer Books and Afterwards, working downtown. And it was really busy that night, and some people was coming up, they're putting their names on the list to be seated, and I'm taking down the names, and about that time, Adina walks up. Adina is a 6-foot-tall Bosnian refugee with peroxide spiked hair and red lipstick. And she looks at me and she goes, "Do you know who that was?" Because Adina spoke with a really low voice. Think Kathleen Turner with a Slavic accent. And I said, "No, I do not," because I spoke with a really high voice with a southern accent. Think Gomer Pyle. She said, "That's Bono." And I look over in the bookstore, and there's this little tiny man standing about this tall, and he's got this red hoodie on, and he's got it pulled up over his head, which is really common now, but was not common in the mid-90s. And I was like, "That's Bono? He looks like one of those sand people from Star Wars. The first one, the good one." She goes, "It's him." So I went over and I said, "Excuse me, there's been a mistake. We have a seat for you right away. It'll just be one wee moment." Get it? Irish, tiny, wee? Never mind. So I take him into the restaurant and I sit him down by the windows, hoping that other people walking by will go, "Hey, that's Bono," and they'll feel like they can come in and I can justify spending, charging people $25 for a piece of cake and a cup of coffee. So Adina comes back up to me and she's like, "I want to wait on him." Now Adina had that little mezzanine area above the bookstore. That was her area that night. And I'm like, it's going to be too much trouble. She goes, "I'll make it happen." So she runs upstairs and she goes, "Excuse me," to all the tables in her station. She said, "If you need to pay, I hope you brought cash." Silverware, napkins, water refills. "I'll be downstairs. Bono's here." Downstairs she went. And the night went kind of smoothly, and Adina had made a promise that she would not geek out, but towards the end, when she's getting ready to present the check, I see her standing at the table, and I go closer by, and I see her, and see, the thing that I didn't know was that Bono, during the Serbian War, Yugoslavian, Bosnian War, Bono and U2 had gone there and done concerts. They had brought social and political pressure, and they brought attention, international attention to this issue. And Adina had seen one of those concerts when she was a teenager, and it had meant something to her. And she started to tell him this story. And she started to geek out just a little bit. So I snuck a little closer. And he said, "Write down your name for me. I'm going to dedicate Miss Sarajevo and my concert to you this weekend. Are you going to be there? I can get you some tickets." And she said, "No. The borders have reopened and I haven't been home in 4 years, so I'm going home for the first time tomorrow morning." And he said, "I bet you're really excited." And she's like, "No. My family, my sister lost her husband to the war. My family has lost everything they own. And I've prospered here in the United States. I feel guilty." And he stood up and he took her hands and he said, "You go home large. You let your family know they are not defeated, that a generation has survived." And Adina started to cry. And she reached out and she hugged him because she's a hugger. And she pulled him right into her navel. And that's when I come running up and I separate them, and that's when it happened. That's when he shook my hand. And I told him that I was the manager and we were taking care of their bill. And he shook my hand again and he said goodbye to Adina, and off he went into the night. And after her shift, Adina went home and she repacked all her luggage. She packed all her good clothes and she dyed the roots in her hair and she reapplied her lipstick and she grabbed her portfolio from the art school she was going to, and off she went. And the next day, her parents come to pick her up at the airport in Tuzla. And there she is, and she comes off the airplane, and there's hugging, and there's laughing, and there's joking. And then finally she goes, "Guess who I met?" And her mother said, "Bono, we know." Because what Adina didn't know is after she had left the restaurant, I'd gotten on the phone and I'd called our PR person who had called the Washington Post. And Saturday morning on the 3rd page of the style section, the reliable source, there it was. Bono is spotted in the wee hours at Kramer's. Okay, it's funny when they write it, I get it. And he promised to dedicate Miss Sarajevo to his waitress, Adina, in bold letters. Like she was somebody. The AP had picked this up. The Voice of America had picked this up. And her parents, in a car, the way to pick her up, heard this story on the radio. Go home large. Let them know you're not defeated. Large indeed. Thank you.
Wow.